Good morning, and praise the Lord. I'm very excited that our main reading is from the book of Proverbs, because one of the course units that I teach here is Psalms and Wisdom Literature, which includes the Proverbs. And Proverbs, of course, are wonderful, short, little teachings about how to lead a godly life. And when I think about what Proverbs 11 has to do with leadership, it's really about integrity. So our theme from today comes from verses 10 and 11, prosperity through godly leadership. Prosperity through godly leadership. And to have integrity is to be morally sound. And we see the teacher's guidance on integrity very clearly here. So being morally sound and doing the right thing, that's what you do when people watch you. But integrity is also what you do when people are not watching you. Because to do the right thing when people are watching is easy. But to do the right thing when no one is watching and there will be no witnesses, that can sometimes be a bit more of a challenge. And the chapter begins with a very clear statement. The Lord abhors dishonest scales. He hates cheating, but accurate scales are his delight. So we see where this is going. God is very clear. There is one way that is good and godly, and one way that is wicked. And as we go on to verse 3, we see the integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. So we see clearly what pleases the Lord, integrity and honesty. And what displeases him is unfaithfulness and cheating, which the Lord sees as wicked. So this is simple enough, isn't it? Just do the right thing and you will be good. You don't, and you're not. Yet, I think this is something that we all tend to struggle with. And what is interesting to me is that the Lord describes integrity and faithfulness and holiness in terms of weights and scales, like we saw in verse 1. He does that quite a lot in the Old Testament. We see in Leviticus 19:35-36 that God instructed Israel to use honest standards, with the reminder that I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. As a reminder that he is the Lord their God, he is holy, and because he is holy, he expects Israel to be holy. So a life of honesty, integrity shows our holiness, which we get from the Lord. Deuteronomy 25:15-16 tells us that you must have accurate and honest weights and measures so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. For the Lord detests anyone who does these things, anyone who deals dishonesty. So living in honesty and integrity was also a condition for Israel to live well in the promised land, because, again, they are to be the Lord's witnesses to the nations. Now, of course, over time, nothing has changed, really, has it? God still hates dishonesty, and we still see dishonesty, don't we? Rather often. It's rather unfortunate. In December, I went to visit a student, to supervise a student in a neighboring country, and so obviously, when I got to the border, I needed to change money. And so you go and you leave Uganda, then you move to another line to enter the country, and then you're finished, and then there's someone there waiting for you. Ah, Nyabo, you're most welcome. Do you need to change money? Yes, I do. Oh, let me help you. You come with me. And so they guide, it's very smooth, guide you over to the Forex, past the board with the exchange rate, conveniently. It's there, but you're not called attention to it, and into the room with the guy who has his stacks of money waiting. Oh, you're most welcome. How much would you like to change? This much. Ah, I have it ready for you. Here you go. Okay, thank you. And you stand there and you move a little bit because other people are coming, and you count and you realize, wait a minute. I'm allergic to numbers, but I can do simple math. The money in my hand is not what was posted on the board. Has that happened to anyone else? Is it just me? Now, I could have gone back, by the way. I should have gone back. I was traveling for UCU, so I was in my collar, so I'm a bit disappointed that the man thought he could cheat a priest. Not only he thought, he did cheat a priest. Now, the next time I go, should I tell that man that God hates dishonest scales? Should I remind him? And should I take out my calculator and say, you said here, so this is the money you give me. Should I do that? Okay, I'll tell you next year how it goes. Now, of course, leadership encompasses much more than just business dealings. Leadership must benefit God's people because ultimately we are leading for others. We talk about servant leadership as if it is something different and novel and exciting, but really, I think all leadership is servant leadership. Because if you're a leader and no one is following you, you're just on a journey alone, aren't you? Just by yourself. But if you are leading people, you're doing something for them, to benefit them, and they stay with you when you move. And that happens whether you are leading a church, whether you are leading a classroom, a fellowship, a business, whatever it is, you have a reason for being in leadership, and that reason is to serve your people. And isn't that how we refer to terms of office? The President of the United States serves. He serves for a 4-year term. Unless he's re-elected, then it's 8 years. Someone can serve as the chair of a committee. You see the word serving implying servant leadership. And yet we talk about leadership as if it's a service that we provide. And I think that's appropriate. In my pre-ordination life, I was a management consultant, and for much of my career, I worked with the military. And they have a saying, rank has its privileges. Rank has its privileges. And if you want to see ceremony, go to a promotion ceremony. Oh, someone is getting a new rank, and look, I am so big now, and I get all these things, and all these people will be answering to me, and such a big thing. Rank has its privileges. You stand a little taller. And I have a friend who would say, no, rank has its responsibilities. And she's right. Because as a leader, you are there to serve. We tend to forget this. We tend to forget that leadership is serving rather than being served. Now, of course, since leaders exist to serve others, how we lead affects other people. In this passage, the teacher is looking at how living according to God's precepts of honesty and integrity blesses the city. And I think we all know this is true. When our leaders lead well, it goes well for us. When our leaders do not lead well, it goes very poorly for us. And especially we see this with corruption and dishonesty. It goes very poorly. Now, I am not throwing stones here. God knows the United States has illustrated this principle rather well in the last few years. I think all of our governments, unfortunately, the people have disappointed us and shown us how to lead improperly. Now, not all of us may become civic leaders, not all of us may become MPs or mayors, but we all have spheres of influence wherever we are. And so I would like to redefine the word city here. It's as any place that you have influence, because you have it. It could be small, it could just be your hostel, your dorm. It could be larger, it could be a fellowship, it could be your class, it could be the entire guild, the entire university. But you have a sphere of influence where God has placed you. John Maxwell, the leadership expert, who is also a Christian, has a list of 21 indispensable traits of leaders. And one of them is servanthood. And he notes that servanthood is not about a position or a skill, I think we tend to think of servants as being below us, don't we? If you're serving me, you're much lower. I am up here, and you're down there. But it's not true. It's not the case. Several years ago, during Holy Week, the Maundy Thursday service, we were doing the foot washing as we usually do, and I was among those who were washing feet. And I had finished. There was no one in front of me, and I saw that in the line next to me was one of my students. And so I said, "Oh, you come." And his eyes got big. He was absolutely appalled. "Oh, Reverend, no, not you. You can't wash my feet." I said, "Gway, isn't that the point? Isn't it? Isn't that the point of Holy Week, of Jesus washing the disciples' feet? Who should have been doing the washing? Yet it was Jesus." I said, "Now, my friend, are you going to deny me this privilege of serving you?" He said, "Yes." I said, "No, sit." And he sat. Jesus did not come to be served. Jesus came to serve. We heard that in our reading from Mark 10. And so we should do the same. Servanthood is about attitude, and Maxwell points out that the best leaders want to serve others, not themselves. He says that the first mark of servanthood is the ability to put others ahead of yourself and your personal desires. In terms of our Proverbs passage, it's wanting to see the city be blessed, or whatever your sphere of influence is. And that means serving with integrity. Sheila Murray Bethel puts it this way: if leadership serves only the leader, it will fail. Ego satisfaction, financial gain, and status can all be valuable tools for a leader, but if they become the only motivations, they will eventually destroy a leader. Only when service for a common good is the primary purpose are you truly leading. So we see this in the Proverbs passage, don't we? Ego, finance, and status are what motivate us to be selfish, not to serve. But that's not leadership, is it? It's just lust and greed. Leaders are to serve their people, not to steal from them. Jesus said the world would know that we are his disciples by our love. Is that how we show our love? I'm going to love myself the best before I love you. Is that how the world will know that I belong to Jesus? Or is it when I put you before me and show my love and you show your love to each other? That's how the world will know that we belong to Jesus. Now, I have a question. Why are there so few examples of good leadership? Why do you think that is? I think we have many examples of poor leadership. Just take a look at the headlines in the New Vision or the Daily Monitor or the Washington Post or the New York Times or any newspaper on any given day, and you will see story after story about leaders who are only serving themselves, either by stealing money or resources or ensuring that their families are cared for rather than their people, rather than their cities. But where are the positive examples? Why are they harder to find? Where are the mass comm students? By the way, we want to read those things. We want to read these positive examples and be built up, not just read all the stories of corruption. I asked several of my Ugandan friends for positive examples of godly leadership, and unfortunately I received very few responses. However, the positive examples do exist. For example, the Bishop of Chinchizi started a campaign for good hygiene in the diocese to ensure that every home has a latrine, a kitchen, and boiled water for drinking. Now many homes have it. The Bishop of Ankoli has established 2 scholarships in every church-founded school in the diocese to help needy children, and these scholarships run from primary to university. And I think it's easy to sit back and say, that's a bishop. He can do that. Me, I'm just a lecturer. I can't do anything. Me, I'm just a student. I can't do much. But I disagree. The fact of the matter is you are only responsible for what God has given you. So if he has given you this much, this is what you're responsible for. If he has given you this much, this is what you're responsible for. If he has given you this much, this is what you're responsible for. The bishops have been given this much. They've been given a diocese. They have to care for their people. If you have a fellowship, that is your sphere of influence. Maybe it's your class. Maybe it's your family, your siblings. I don't know. I don't care the size of your sphere. God has given you one. I promise he has given you one. And he has given you the ability to influence it and lead it well. I have a friend in South Africa, and her neighborhood had a series of break-ins and a lot of thefts going on. And so the neighborhood got together to think of ways that they could stop this. And so they came up with many ideas, and Kelly, my friend, is in marketing. That's where she works. And so she led the marketing campaign to get streetlights installed. Streetlights. So she launched a Facebook campaign, and she led the signature petition, and she led the talking to the media to get the story in the newspapers and on the news, and she got the word out. And they succeeded. They got the streetlights installed, and the crime has gone down. Was she the overall leader of this effort? Can she take all the credit? No. Was her role large? Honestly, I'm not sure. Maybe, maybe not. But she was faithful to serve with the gifts God gave her, and the neighborhood was certainly blessed. I submit that it takes courage to lead according to God's principles, especially in light of a culture in which corruption is the norm, or where Christianity is no longer valued. And by the way, it is much easier for me to be a priest here than it is in the U.S. It's sad, but it's very true. It's much easier to be a Christian and a priest in Uganda than it is in the United States. Jesus was very clear that following him would not always be easy, but that it would be worth it. Before I came to Uganda, I was very involved with a prison ministry called Kairos. Twice a year, every 6 months, we would go into a women's prison for about 40 hours over a 4-day weekend to minister to these women. It's a wonderful and very labor-intensive ministry, and it has a very detailed program. The manual of what we have agreed with the Department of Corrections is about like this. All the things we will do, when we will do it, who will do it, things we won't do. It had to be approved. We cannot deviate from that program. If we deviate from that program, the Department of Corrections can tell us that we will no longer come in. And that it would not be good, so we work very hard to follow what we are supposed to do. And one of the things I appreciate about Kairos is the way that they mentor or bring up people in ministry. To lead a weekend, you have to actually commit to leading for a year and a half, because first you are the observing leader, so you are watching someone lead. In 6 months you are leading, and then in 6 months you are advising the person who was observing you. So you watch, you do, and you guide someone else. I think it's a good progression to ensure that the leadership is run well. Now, in Kairos, I generally served as the music director. I'm actually also a musician, and it was hard to find women musicians who would go into a prison. And so that was the main thing I usually did, but then someone decided that I needed to grow and lead a weekend. So I served as the observing leader, and then I led a weekend, and then I was serving as the advising leader. But that leader, her name was Melinda, she didn't come and consult me very much. She was a strong leader and didn't need my opinion, and everything looked okay to me, so I did not ask many questions. Unfortunately, she became very sick before the weekend, and her doctor would not allow her to attend because it's just physically very taxing. And so about a week before we went into the prison, I had to take over and lead. So I was sitting down looking at all the things that she had planned, and I realized that some of the things she had done were contrary to our agreement with the prison. So I had a problem. I could let things go in as planned because we had been working for 2 months for this weekend, and everybody was ready and had their things to do, and I could let them go in and pray that nobody noticed that things were not quite right. Or I could say, things are not quite right. We need to make changes. And then fulfill our agreement with the Department of Corrections. So I prayed and talked with the observing leader, and I decided that leaving things as they were would have been like using dishonest scales. We agreed with the Department of Corrections what we were going to do, and if I violated that agreement, I would be cheating. And so I made changes at the last minute. They were very unpopular with Melinda's friends, who felt I was undoing her work. It made for a very stressful couple days in ministry with those ladies. Now, would the Department of Correction have known if things were not right? Maybe, I don't know. It depends how closely they looked. But there's a possibility they could know, isn't there? There's a possibility they could have checked. Would I have been able to live with myself if I had kept things as they were and we had been caught? No, absolutely not. Because it would have had consequences for that ministry. And let me tell you, that ministry blesses the city, the prison. I could go on for hours about the fruit that I have seen in those ladies because of that ministry. But let me tell you, there is nothing like worshiping the Lord Jesus Christ in a prison and feeling the darkness get pushed back because of the praises of the saints. It's almost indescribable. Almost indescribable. But that joy of the power of praising God, it's amazing. And I am not going to jeopardize that. Never. No way. So, of course, I had discussed this with the observing leader. I did not have an advising leader because that was me. So I discussed it with myself. And I made this decision with her. I'm an only child. I talk to myself. And so it's true. I made this decision with her support, the observing. But I assure you, it was not easy. It was not easy dealing with Melinda's friends that weekend and in the months after. But I think it was worth it. I had peace knowing that nothing was going to stop our weekend or any weekend to follow. Now, I want to conclude with one last thought from Maxwell. He notes that once you reach a certain level in leadership, the most valuable thing you have to give is yourself. The most valuable thing you have to give is yourself. And I think this hits on something important. We have very high expectations of our leaders, don't we? We expect them to do everything and to do it perfectly, and oh, by the way, to do it now. But are we raising up people to be like them? Are we mentoring people to learn how to lead well? How to lead with integrity? How to handle challenges well? Because they're hard, they're frustrating. Sometimes I want to bang my head. But are we raising up people? Are we finding people in the next generation and bringing them along? Because we will not be here forever. Are we raising up people to lead with integrity? Are we serving, not just directing others, and are we bringing others when we do it? I think this is a powerful thing, and it's sometimes overlooked. It's a powerful way to pass on godly leadership, mentoring and discipleship. I know I have been mentored and discipled by amazing women who just invited me to come along as they were in ministry. And I learned so much from just being with them, just serving with them. That experience is irreplaceable. It's a powerful teacher. Are we doing this? Are we sharing our gifts and our talents in service, or are we holding them close? I pray that we're a people who not only blesses our cities, but raises up the next generation to do the same. Amen.